Are you accidentally running an illegal rent experiment without knowing it? In 2026, using the wrong pricing data or bundling the wrong services can turn a normal lease into a lawsuit magnet. And yes, there are receipts involved. Keep watching. I'm breaking down 10 landmines that target casual landlords, rent limits, new disclosure traps, post-disaster obligations, and defenses that stall your case for months. You'll see exactly where the tripwires are and how to step over them before the clock hits January. Before we continue, hit subscribe so you never miss the latest updates. Number 1, statewide rent caps. That limit annual increases. Think you can nudge rent 10% and call it a day? One decimal place wrong, and you just funded your tenant's attorney. Here's the thing. California's statewide cap isn't a vibe, it's a formula. It's 5% plus CPI with a ceiling, which sounds simple until you realize CPI is not one number. There's an index for your metro, a release date, and a look-back period. Use the wrong region or the wrong month, and your safe increase goes stale. CPI can swing a full point or two year to year. If you pull last spring's data for a September notice, you're already off. But here's the catch. Timing rules stack with the math. The cap sits on top of your notice requirements and, in many places, local caps. That means the lowest number wins. If you serve a notice using last year's CPI or mistime the effective date, the increase can be void. Tenants will argue retaliation if your error shows up right after a complaint or repair request. Courts look at dates like hawks. I watched a small duplex owner grab a generic online template, punch in a 10% bump using a statewide CPI average, and send it first class with no proof. Wrong region, wrong calculation. Result? Roll back to the prior rent, refund of overcharges, and statutory penalties. The notice didn't even cite the source CPI or the applicable period, so the tenant's lawyer had a field day. Treat CPI like milk. You need the freshest date stamp, or it turns sour in court. That means a documented, independent pricing process. Align your increase effective date with the exact CPI release you rely on. Cite the index series name. Screenshot the page. Timestamp it. And match the statutory notice length to the day. 30 or 90 days, depending on the jump in tenancy length, not vibes. Number 2, permanent just cause eviction requirements. Ending a lease because vibes are off? That's not a cause. That's a lawsuit. Here's the thing. California runs on permanent just cause. You don't end a tenancy unless you can point to an at-fault reason, like non-payment or serious lease breaches, or a no-fault reason that the law recognizes. No fault means you're taking responsibility. Owner or qualifying relative actually moving in, or substantial rehab that requires vacancy. And when it's no fault, relocation money leaves your pocket. The baseline exists at the state level, but local rules can crank the bill higher and add extra hoops. Along with money, you owe proof, real documents that match the reason you claim. But here's the catch. Paperwork dictates reality. If the notice doesn't label the cause correctly, you're done. If a pre-termination notice is required for the at-fault issue and you skip it, you're done. If you say owner move-in but forget the relocation payment or the required attachments, you're done. Courts toss cases over missing pages, wrong timelines, and sloppy service. It's not vibes, it's checkboxes with deadlines. I've seen mom-and-pop owners try an owner move-in and miss the basic step. Signing the occupancy intent declaration with the timeline baked in. They served a notice with the words, but no executed declaration. Case stalls. Tenant attorney asks for penalties and fees. Months pass, rent doesn't, and now the owner is paying to reserve a corrected packet plus relocation funds they should have budgeted on day one. Owner move-in means you or your qualifying relative actually live there. You'll need utility bills in the new name, government ID with that address, mail delivery records, something that shows you didn't fake it. If you say you're moving in and then don't, penalties are real. Courts look for occupancy within the stated window and continued residence, not a weekend couch surf followed by a relist at higher rent. Research shows unlawful detainers crash for the same reasons over and over. Bad cause labeling, missing attachments, and wrong timelines. Pre-notices not served. Relocation money not tendered on time. Notices that cite the wrong basis. Proof of service that fails to identify who accepted delivery. It's boring admin, and that's why it kills cases. It's like TSA. If your boarding pass name doesn't match, you're not flying. Same unit, same tenant, same facts. But the label and attachments decide whether you take off. Number 3, mandatory stove and refrigerator provision in rentals. That Craigslist fridge you left as is? In 2026, that's a statutory liability with a 30-day timer. Here's the thing. A B628 makes stoves and refrigerators mandatory for any new, amended, or extended lease signed on or after January 1st, 2026. Not optional. If the unit leases, those 2 appliances must be there and working. This flips the old bring your own fridge culture on its head, especially in buildings where landlords never provided them. The duty isn't just to set them in place, it's to keep them safe and functional during the tenancy. But here's the catch. Recall obligations are now on you. If a stove or fridge is subject to a recall, you've got 30 days from notification to repair or replace. Lease disclaimers like appliances provided as is or no warranty won't save you. The law says fix it or swap it fast. Miss the window and you're staring at violations that stack with habitability claims. Tenants don't need to argue theory. They point to the recall and the calendar. A tenant reports a burner that won't ignite. You slow walk it, then you learn the model is under an active recall. The 30-day clock isn't a vibe, it's a stopwatch. Now you're scrambling for parts, scheduling a tech, and hoping inventory exists. If the model is on back order, replacement may be the only way to stay inside the window. And if your vendor ghosted you, that's your problem, not the tenant's. So, build the receipts, document the appliance model and serial numbers at move-in. Keep them in a shared drive. Set up recall monitoring, CPSC alerts, manufacturer lists, distributor bulletins. Create vendor service level agreements that guarantee a diagnostic within 72 hours and a fix or swap path before day 30. If the tech can't source parts, your SLA should trigger an automatic replacement order. Costs add up. New basic stoves and fridges aren't luxury purchases, but they're not cheap either. Service visits, stack fees, and delivery swaps come with haul-away charges and dreaded next available windows that can stretch a week or more. Recalls aren't rare events either. They appear often enough that a once-a-year sweep won't cut it. Think of recalls like software patches. Ignore them and you're breached, legally. Update your lease forms now. List the appliances you provide by name. Clarify that you handle maintenance and recall compliance. Spell out how tenants report issues, including an email, a portal link, and an after-hours line. Add a response timeline so your staff knows the clock started. Number 4. Stronger tenant eviction defenses for financial hardship. You serve a 3-day notice. They serve a federal benefits letter. Guess whose clock stops? Here's the thing, a B-246 hands tenants a shield when Social Security checks shrink or vanish due to agency delays. If they qualify and show proof, a judge can pause the eviction and keep it paused for months, up to 6 after benefits restart. That means your timeline doesn't just stretch, it freezes, then resumes on the court's schedule. Rent still accrues. Late fees and interest can snowball. And if you stumble on process, your credibility tanks right when you need the court to believe you're acting in good faith. But here's the catch. The defense only works if the paperwork is clean. The tenant must produce documentation that their SSA benefits were delayed or reduced through no fault of their own, and that the timing matches the rent default. When that lines up, your case stalls. Court calendars already move slowly. Add a statutory stay and you're feeding a meter that keeps running on storage costs, legal fees, and vacancy risk if you locked yourself out of payment options. Take a fixed income renter who files their SSA letters, benefit statements, and a resumption date. They meet the criteria. The judge grants a stay key to when the check starts flowing again and can extend protection for up to 6 months after that date. During that window, you're not collecting the balance through lockouts. You're managing a frozen case with mounting ledger entries and a tenant who might only be able to offer partial payments. You need receipts for everything. Keep a precise payment ledger with dates, amounts, and applied periods. Maintain outreach records, emails, texts, phone logs, asking for hardship info and offering structured payment plans. Draft a hardship protocol that triggers before you serve any notice. Request documentation, set a response deadline, and provide clear options. Courts favor landlords who showed a path to resolution and documented it, not landlords who sprinted to file. Typical SSA hiccups aren't rare. Processing lags, overpayment adjustments, and identity verification backlogs can stretch weeks into months. Courts look for agency letters, benefit verification printouts, and timelines that tie directly to the missed rent. Thin screenshots and vague claims don't cut it, but well-organized packets do. It's like a freeze frame in a sports replay. Everything stops while the ref reviews the tape, and your win depends on the angles you saved. Number 5, expanded habitability standards with harsher penalties. A warm apartment in August? In 2026, the thermostat might be Exhibit A. Here's the thing. California just expanded what habitable means. A B628 folds appliances into the baseline. SB 610 forces you to follow official disaster cleanup protocols before a unit is considered safe. And SB 655 points to maximum indoor temperature standards on the horizon. That means the checklist now runs past no leaks, no pests. You're on the hook for functioning basics, compliant remediation after smoke or mold, and preparing for enforceable cooling thresholds. But here's the catch. Habitability isn't a vibe, it's verifiable. Cooling thresholds exist or are coming. Smoke and mold require documented mitigation, not a bleach parade. If you can't prove compliance, you're exposed. Tenants don't have to out-argue you, they point to missing tests, missing clearances, and a heat index that makes your property a toaster. A tenant reports smoke odor after a nearby fire. You wipe the walls and swap a filter. No IAQ testing. No licensed remediation. No public health clearance. Under SB 610, that's not cleanup, that's a shortcut. The unit stays uninhabitable until authorities clear it, rent liability shifts, and the penalties move from annoying to expensive. If mold blooms 2 weeks later, you just wrote the plaintiff's opening statement. So, build proof, not vibes. Document indoor air quality tests with lab results. Keep remediation invoices from certified vendors that reference the specific protocols followed. File the clearance letter from public health and attach it to the tenant record. When you wing it, penalty math escalates fast because it reads like willful neglect, not an honest miss. Public health cleanup protocols and mold remediation best practices exist for a reason. They chain together containment, removal, filtration, verification, and sign-off. Skip one step, and the clock doesn't start. Under the new framework, we cleaned it doesn't matter. We cleared it does. Treat your unit like a commercial kitchen. Logs, standards, and inspections, or it's shut down. That mindset pays for itself during the first dispute. Now, plan for heat. Build a heat mitigation playbook, stock portable coolers for emergencies, schedule HVAC inspections before the first heat wave, and set up shaded common areas or cooling spaces. Draft a response tree for excessive indoor temps with time-stamped checks, escalation triggers, and vendor calls that happen the same day, not next week. When the thermometer spikes, your records need to sprint. Number 6, tighter rules on notices and lease disclosures. Wrong envelope, wrong email, wrong language, and your notice never happened. Here's the thing. A B1414 gives tenants the right to opt out of bundled third-party subscription services that ride on your lease. Think internet or wireless tied to tenancy. Once the tenancy renews or goes month to month on or after January 1st, 2026, a B414 tightens how you deliver security deposit refunds and move-out statements. Electronic delivery only works if both sides agree to it. No agreement. First-class mail is the default. That sounds harmless until you realize courts toss close enough like yesterday's junk mail. But here's the catch. If you auto-bill a tech package or concierge trash and ignore a valid opt-out, tenants can deduct those charges from rent, and the law shields them from retaliation. So your ledger shows a short pay, but legally they're square. Push back, and you're handing them a retaliation claim with screenshots. I've watched this play in real life. Landlord adds a $45 tech package to every lease. Tenant opts out under AB 1414. Billing keeps hitting the account for 3 months because the software wasn't updated. Tenant deducts the fee from rent. Landlord posts a 3-day for the difference. Queue dispute, fee refunds, and a very annoyed judge asking why the opt-out form never reached accounting. You need infrastructure, not vibes. Create an opt-out mechanism tenants can use in writing. Get acknowledgement forms signed and date stamped. Run monthly billing audits to catch stray fees that should have been removed. On delivery, map your notice methods to AB 414. If you don't have a written e-delivery agreement, use first-class mail for deposit statements and refunds. If the tenant previously paid electronically, align your notice process to their consent settings or default to compliant mail. And document it. Research points to the same pressure points. Electronic delivery requires mutual agreement. Without it, first-class mail controls. Multi-tenant refunds need clear payee rules when there's no written designation. Miss that, and you create roommate warfare and a refund boomerang. Keep a log of which adult tenants lived there, where each wants documents sent, and how funds should be split when no agreement exists. It's like a subscription trap, but you're the one getting charged in court. The longer the junk fee lingers, the bigger the mess, and the easier the retaliation claim. Number 7. Faster repair and rent. Freeze obligations after disasters. After a fire, your rent increase plans are irrelevant. The law says pause. Here's the thing, SB 610 turns disasters into a rulebook. You handle debris removal. You mitigate hazards like smoke and mold using government cleanup protocols. The unit stays not habitable until public health gives official clearance. During mandatory evacuations, tenants don't owe rent, period. And when it's safe, they get the right to return at the same rent, unless the tenancy was lawfully ended some other way. Your revenue model now rides on compliance timing, not just speed. But here's the catch. The timelines and documentation are brutal. If you miss a clearance step or skip a protocol, you're blocked from releasing or adjusting rent. A half-cleaned unit with a new coat of paint is still uninhabitable without sign-off. Try to collect anyway, and you're writing your own penalty memo. The calendar is a weapon, and it's not in your hands. Real-world mess. A wildfire hits. Evacuation order goes out. Tenant leaves. Landlord bills half a month because the building was fine by week 2. No public health clearance, no debris certificate, tenant disputes. Now you've got rent that can't be charged, a potential retaliation angle if you push, and a paper trail that invites enforcement. All of it avoidable with the right sequence and receipts. You need a roster before the wind changes. Line up remediation vendors who know the protocols. Pre-negotiate service level agreements. On-site assessment within 24 to 48 hours. Lab sampling timelines. Clearance report delivery dates. Track every step with photos. Chain of custody forms for air and surface tests. And third-party certificates. Your goal is to turn chaos into a clean, time-stamped narrative that survives court and insurance scrutiny. Recovery is never plug and play. Average timelines stretch because insurers juggle thousands of claims. Adjusters change. Scope approvals lag. Contractors queue jobs. Coordination eats weeks you thought you had. If you don't anchor each action to a document, the delay looks like neglect instead of the industry standard traffic jam. That's how cost balloon and patience evaporates. It's like a pit stop in F1. Seconds count and every roll is scripted. Miss one wrench and the whole race is gone. Build your comms now. Draft evacuation notices that cite the order. Push habitability status updates on a cadence. Assessment scheduled. Testing in progress. Clearance pending. Prepare the Return to Occupy template that attaches the clearance and restates the rent freeze period, the right of return, and the expected reentry date. Number 8, security deposit return and documentation restrictions. Miss one receipt or send to the wrong person, and your deposit deduction evaporates. Here's the thing. A B414 rewires the security deposit return process starting January 1st, 2026. Electronic delivery is allowed, but only with a mutual agreement on file. No agreement? First-class mail is the default for move-out statements and refunds. It also sets rules for multi-tenant refunds, so you don't guess who gets the check and trigger a fight. The law rewards clean processes and punishes vibes. If your delivery doesn't match the rulebook, courts can treat your package like it never existed. But here's the catch. If tenants previously paid rent or deposits electronically, your move-out notices must align with those electronic payment realities, and you still need explicit consent for e-delivery. Miss that consent, and an emailed statement is a legal ghost. Use the wrong address, and your 21-day clock might as well be a countdown to small claims. Classic chaos. 3 roommates. No written agreement on who gets the refund. You cut one check to the person who shouted loudest. The others file a dispute. Now, your itemized deductions get dragged into a fight you created by skipping the multi-tenant payout rules. You didn't just mishandle delivery, you handed over a narrative that you can't manage money you're legally holding in trust. So, build evidence like you're getting audited. Itemize everything with photos and timestamps from the pre- and post-walkthrough. Attach invoices or written estimates for each deduction. Note the date, vendor, and scope for every repair. Keep a delivery log that shows how you sent documents and funds, whether by first-class mail or a pre-agreed electronic channel. Save the tenant's explicit e-delivery consent or your proof of mailing, because without it, you're arguing feelings against a statute. What happens in small claims? Judges lean on documentation. Landlords who miss delivery steps or show vague wear and tear photos lose deductions and risk statutory damages. Clean packets, clear timelines, and correct payees win. That's the pattern. The risk isn't just a refund, it's penalties for sloppy compliance layered on top. Treat it like a tax audit. You need receipts for every line item. No receipt, no deduction, no consent, no e-delivery, no payee rules, no single check. Number 9, local rent control laws stacking on state rules. State cap says yes. City cap says no. Guess who wins? The stricter one. Here's the thing. California's statewide rent cap sets the outer fence. Local rent control draws a smaller box inside it, and that smaller box rules your life. If the state math says you can raise 7%, but your city's allowable increase is 3%, you're at 3%. No, you can't split the difference. The overlay is real and the city's rulebook sits on top like a weight. Miss the local piece and your legal increase turns into an overcharge you'll have to refund with interest. But here's the catch. Cities don't just cap the number. They bolt on extra notice language, relocation obligations for certain units, and, my personal favorite, mandatory registries. If you never registered the unit with the rent board or skipped an annual declaration, your increase can be void on arrival. Some cities also require proof of a registered rent level before any change. No entry in the system? No raise. This bites small owners constantly. A duplex owner in a rent-controlled city runs the state cap calculation, posts the notice, and moves on. They never created a rent board account, never paid the annual fee, and didn't check the city's lower threshold. Months later, the tenant files with the board. Result: ordered refund of the difference, rollback to the prior legal rent, and a compliance plan the owner should have done on day 1. The math wasn't the problem. The missing local paperwork killed it. So build a city-by-city compliance sheet. For every property, track the annual allowable increase, any banking rules, exemption categories, and the exact registration deadlines. Some places treat new construction differently. Others require annual rent reports even if you didn't change a dollar. You need the nuance in writing next to each address, not floating in your head. Look at municipal rent boards that publish increases below the state cap year after year. That's the norm, not the outlier. When the city says 2.5%, that's your ceiling, even if the state formula spits out a bigger number. And when a board delays its annual bulletin, you wait. Raise too early and you bought yourself a refund. It's like driving with 2 speed limits. The smaller sign is the one the cop uses. The ticket doesn't care that the freeway said 65 if the local stretch said 45. Add reminders for annual filings. Save proof of registration and fee payment in each tenant file. Keep the board's increase notice with a date stamp so your packet shows why you chose that number. Number 10. Increasing enforcement and lawsuits against small landlords. That sexy pricing software? In 2026, it could be Exhibit A in an antitrust case. Here's the thing. A B325 and S B763 sharpen the Cartwright Act knives for housing. When rent decisions lean on shared competitor inputs, aggregated dashboards, pooled datasets, cross-portfolio syncs, the state reads that as coordinated effects, not independent judgment. You're not just using market data. You might be training with the same playbook as your rivals, then acting surprised when everyone moves the number in unison. But here's the catch. Algorithms don't need a smoky backroom to signal. If your pricing tool ingests rival rents, vacancy curves, or push recommendations that also land in your neighbor's inbox, you're echoing each other. That's signaling. Investigators won't care that you clicked accept alone in your office. They'll map the inputs, the timing, and the pattern. If it walks like coordination and quacks like coordination, congrats, you're in the splash zone. Example time. A mid-size owner pulls comps from a vendor tool that aggregates nearby rent rolls and recommends optimal increases. The same vendor sells to half the submarket. A few weeks later, rent adjustments hit across multiple buildings within a narrow band. Tenants complain. Regulators connect two dots and a calendar. Now, the tool and your memos are under a microscope, and you're explaining how independent your decision was while the data trail says otherwise. You need an independent lane. Build pricing from the ground up. Your vacancy rate, your unit level demand, your expenses, and comps. You gathered manually from public, non-coordinated sources like listed ads and closed leases you can verify. Document seasonality you've seen, concessions you offered, and any maintenance backlog that changes unit value. Then lock it with a rationale that stands alone. Recent cases against revenue management tools show where this goes. Discovery into inputs, timelines, and who relied on what. Penalties don't just smack big players. Individuals who knew or should have known can get dragged too. This isn't hypothetical theater. It's real. It's happening. Think poker. Showing your hand to the table isn't strategy, it's collusion. When a tool pools hands, it stops being intelligence and becomes evidence. So build a paper spine. Keep a pricing memo for every change. List data sources you used. Attach date-stamped screenshots of public listings, not vendor dashboards that blend competitor feeds. Note your internal constraints, turn costs, insurance hikes, property taxes, and how they shaped your number. Save the memo with the effective date and who approved it. If you're audited, you hand over a clean narrative that starts and ends inside your walls. Here's the thing, 2026 kills passive. You're running compliance ops now, pricing memos, appliance recalls, disaster playbooks, deposit audits. That's not side hustle energy. That's a mini corporation for every address you own. Let that sink in. Like this video so the algorithm thinks I'm important. Subscribe if you want more survival guides before January hits. So, would you do it? Would you run HR, legal, and facilities for a single duplex? Or cash out while the market still takes your call? Comment armor up if you're building SOPs or I'm out if you're listing it next week.